Happy Friday, everyone, and happy Veterans Day. Welcome to Gateway Office Hours. I'm Ben Larson. I'm the co-founder of Gateway. My co-founder has abandoned me once again. Hey, Carter. Hope you're doing well. Thank you for joining us. It's an exciting episode. There's been a lot happening. I think the fact that it's Veterans Day and we get to talk about the medicinal uses of cannabis often on the show. We've also been seeing a lot in the news about the FDA kind of cracking down on claims that have been made by different CBD companies. It's only a matter of time before that starts working its way into the cannabis industry as a whole. We have brought on a great founder of a company called Biomarker. They are working to bring evidence-based efficacy to various products that are launched. This has a huge opportunity in the cannabis industry, and while they're a mainstream company, we're really excited about what this can do for an industry that has many different applications. So I'd like to welcome Garrett Ruhland of Biomarker.io. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Ben.
Yeah, my pleasure. So before I get to that, I'm supposed to tell everyone to engage with us, like us, leave reviews, ask us questions, whatever it takes. We want you to help guide this conversation, whether it's here on Facebook or Twitter. Just hit us up, and our lovely studio audience will make sure that we get to answer your questions. So, Garrett, tell us a little bit about Biomarker before we really jump into how you got here.
Absolutely. So Biomarker is an evidence-based personalized nutrition tool. What we do is we work with companies in the health and wellness space, like supplement companies and cannabis companies, looking to engage with their customers using digital health. Mm-hmm. And we allow businesses to actually have their customers collect their health data and use that to then see if the products they are buying actually work or impact their health.
Interesting. And so you're talking about providing actual evidence of people using the products and kind of being able for them to understand the true efficacy of those products.
Correct. So what we've seen now is in most of the supplement industry, 72% of Americans take supplements. But when you ask them if you think they work, mm-hmm. most of them say, yes, I feel that they work. And you say, how do you know?
Yeah.
And they really don't. They base everything off perception and qualitative metrics.
Yeah.
But what we've found is that digital health has reached a tipping point. Just by walking around with a smartphone in your pocket, mm-hmm. you're producing terabytes of data on a daily basis across different applications and services. And this data is quantitative, and it has insights into your health. So what we aim to do is when a user says, I feel that the product's working, we can actually validate that claim with a little bit of quantitative data from that very user.
And that's interesting because previously, and when I say previously, let's just rewind 10 years, a lot of these were a lot of this information was done through surveys and clinical studies and usually extensive processes that require a large sample base and B, kind of an expensive process, right? Is what is kind of the state of clinical studies?
So it's still that state.
It's still that state.
Yeah. So when you look at success in the supplement space, and it's almost in the cannabis space as well now, mm-hmm. it's either one of three areas. You have great customer engagement, retention, or product or supply chain control. Mm-hmm. Engagement is done through either product claims or personalization of the sale of your product. So product claims in the supplement space are usually achieved through running a clinical study. Okay. You pay an exorbitant amount of money to then find an isolated variable and say, we need to make sure this study has the results so then we don't get in trouble with the FTC or the FDA.
So just so the listeners understand, define exorbitant amount.
Exorbitant amount when you're running a clinical study can range anywhere from a couple 100,000 to millions. And you're looking at 9-month, 18-month to 3-year timelines where you have to have a product, you have to go through an institutional review board or IRB approval process to test with humans. And then you have to run the study itself, which is usually done out of a clinic or academic institution. So you're looking at timelines that are done for understanding medications to treat disease. Mm-hmm. And instead you're having companies see this as a marketing expense, where they're running clinical studies just to make product claims that they can put on their bottles or on their websites.
Wow. That's an extensive marketing expense. So over $100,000, maybe $1 million.
Correct.
And maybe even more than a year to complete a study that basically allows you to say, this product helps me with my sleep.
Correct. And that's really because it's the history of the supplement space. Mm-hmm. When you look back 15, 20 years ago, companies would market their product based on ingredient claims. You'd have vitamin A for eye health or omega-3 for heart health. Now, what ended up happening was as supplements became commoditized, it was easy for a business owner to get new raw material and sell that product. So then your competitors were all marketing the same products with different bottles, different labels, and the same claim. So the companies then said, we need a way to differentiate our brand from our competitors. And they moved away from the ingredient and science-based claims to holistic claims. Buy our product for athletes, or buy our product for baby boomers or retirees. Right. And the science kind of went out the window. Now, what we found is that when new companies enter the space with a little bit of science, usually done through our clinically studied products, that's where consumers are more likely to buy from that brand based out of trust.
But understanding how expensive it is and how long that takes, that makes it a very difficult kind of ecosystem to build new companies in, or have startups in. Like, how can't you just slap a label on it that says these claims have not been evaluated by the FDA, and like,
correct.
So with that, like, so what like, maybe I don't want to take you outside of your wheelhouse, but I mean, it's a tough structure for people to navigate, especially in a new industry like the cannabis industry, where maybe those regulations aren't there yet, but they're going to come flooding in, and all of a sudden people are going to have to change their packaging and the claims they're making, and it's like, from what I understand, it's probably not as simple as putting a simple disclaimer on it. Can you elucidate a little bit around that?
Absolutely. So the supplement space is almost very similar to what the cannabis space is starting to become, in that the companies that are most successful to date have been the companies with the largest marketing budgets, the ones that can afford to do the clinical studies, the ones that have control of how their product is presented. Yeah. Now, what we're seeing, though, is that there's almost a Cambrian explosion in the past 5 years of new companies coming to the space with personalized nutrition claims. They're selling genetic services with their supplements, higher engagement. They're selling personalized supplements where you can get a package of supplements with your name on it. And these businesses are actually becoming quite disruptive because they're different from their competitors. Now, many of them sell the same products or same ingredients, just a different way of packaging it. And what we're seeing now in the cannabis space is that it's the same process. If you have the marketing budget, well, then you can compete with the other companies. But the earlier companies are trying to find ways to compete against the Goliaths. And oftentimes that means extreme marketing claims, which lead to regulation.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, this is obviously a complicated issue, a big problem. Anytime something is expensive or there's a big barrier to entry, there's an opportunity there. So what was it like? What were you doing when you realized that this was a problem? What kind of led you into, building Biomarker and trying to solve it?
Absolutely. So my background is actually in neurochemistry from Duke University. So when I graduated, I was going to go directly to medical school, go down the MD PhD route. And my father was a professor of medicine, saw my life flash before my eyes. Okay. And I said, I'm going to take 1 year off. I'm going to try the startup world out, and if I hate it, I'll just go back. And I ended up catching the startup bug. I ended up working as head of research and development for a nutraceutical company. And when I was there, we actually ran our own clinical study. And we bootstrapped it to as much as we could, but it took a very long time. And what I started to see was some of our VIP customers came to us saying, well, what else can we take? And they said, well, I have my Fitbit data. Can I share this with you? Or can I share my 23andMe report? And this was just the beginning, where we saw how there was a demand for personalization.
So they were coming to you.
It was from working in the industry as an actual product employee, trying to figure out ways to personalize the sale, where we ended up discovering there was no current solution. You had to hire a geneticist and a nutritionist and a dietitian to actually work with the client. So then the LTV was relatively low. We had a very, very low margin since it cost so much to hire specialists. And so I said, well, how can we automate this? And it was with digital health adoption where the idea clicked.
Okay. And so there was the realization, you decided, I'm going to leave said nutraceutical company and start building this? Like, what was that transition like?
So I think the realization really came to me when I went to Expo West for the first time. Expo West is a large supplement convention. And, truth be told, when I walked in, I felt sick to my stomach. I saw thousands of companies, all of which were selling very similar raw material and making extreme claims. And I felt frustrated from the consumer's perspective. How do you know which ones work? How can you prove which ones are telling the truth versus which ones have great packaging?
I mean, I think anyone that's gone through a nutrition aisle, like at a grocery store, realizes this. It's just like colors and branding and claims all over the shelves. Next week, we have the MJ BizCon, where there's going to be a litany of booths of different products and everything. So it's going to be a very similar feeling to Expo West. Yeah, I totally understand. So okay, so you were experiencing this pain, and then you're like, I think I have the solution.
Yeah, and I saw what I saw was there is no way for consumers to truly know what works, and businesses are taking advantage of this through aggressive marketing claims, convincing buyers to buy their product. And I wanted to create a prove it tool. If a business says our product does X for Y, I wanted to give the actual consumer an ability to prove it at home.
Interesting.
As
Okay.
opposed to promising what your product will do,
Yeah.
but the consumer never has the ability to actually prove it after they buy.
Yeah.
They base it all on perception.
And so this kind of sounding like a motivator for a lot of pitches that I've heard in the past. And those pitches typically involve journaling, right? Like it's like, oh, I'm going with this diet plan. I'm going to keep track of this. And it's, it lasts for like 3 days and then never gets used again because people are just terrible at journaling. I've tried it myself and yeah, I absolutely suck at it. But you're saying that there's a more passive way that you can collect data that makes it more engaging and people can, it's easier for them to kind of adopt this journaling practice now.
Precisely. So journaling is always going to be an issue for general consumers, but it's the biggest pain point in the medical industry with patient compliance. Physicians would love to know how you're feeling on a daily basis with symptom tracking, but most people don't do it.
Yeah.
But what we do have now are wearables. We have cloud-based applications that collect data consistently about you just by opening up your phone and logging into an application. We know your GPS coordinates. We know what time of day you're logging in. We know your activity. That data can be collected, aggregated, and actually analyzed.
Yeah.
So our aim is to make sure that around 95% of the data we're analyzing is done through existing services that you already use. So only 5% is manual data where you have to actively journal how you're feeling.
And because you have them engaged on an app and stuff like that, I'm assuming you can kind of push those engagements where you're like, how are you feeling today or something like that.
Precisely. And what we
Not
do
to
is,
give away your
no,
secret sauce.
we do use an AI where we learn on behavioral patterns for a consumer. So if one is already compliant, there's no need to badger them with constant notifications. However, if one is starting to drop off beyond their normal pattern, that's a prime candidate to then say, how are you feeling today? It's been a while since we've heard from you. And we can then learn from that process and take those understandings and apply them in a medical setting where we can actually help increase patient compliance.
So this is interesting, especially putting the cannabis industry lens on. I'm constantly looking for the perfect product to help me have a good night's sleep. And I don't want to wake up groggy, and I want this. And I feel like if I had something like this, it could kind of just track my sleep data for me, and I could try a different product for a week, and then I could try a different product for a week. So this thought process is kind of leading me down the kind of B2C path. Is that where you kind of started?
Correct. So when we first started with the idea for Biomarker, we were actually going to build our own B2C company, have our own supplement company that we would use our platform with, to then show those metrics and actually validate the entire business model for a B2B model.
Yeah.
And it was only when we came up in January to join 500 startups and actually join their digital health program where they said, some of our advisors said, you can do one thing really well. You can do B2C or B2B. Yeah. What is your strength?
Yeah. Or a nutraceutical company, which is an entirely different business.
Exactly. And that's actually, that was the prime understanding, because that experiment, essentially, of being a B2C business for a short period of time gave us the greatest insights into our current customers.
Okay.
We've seen the pain points for a nutraceutical company and not only starting one, but trying to become digital.
So you went all the way down that path of actually creating the nutraceuticals.
We put on the coat. We put on the we did absolutely everything that our current customers already do.
Yeah.
So we know exactly what their pain points are. So when we show them our product, we're not selling them. We're just walking them through what we've built, and they're saying, "Well, we want it."
Yeah. So who was the first person to say to you, "It's like you're doing a lot, and it's going to be very hard to kind of scale this. Like, maybe you should check out B2B." Was that a self-realization, or did an investor come in and be like, how about one business model and one that's a little bit easier?
Yeah, so it was actually some of our internal advisors. We had Clayton Bryan, Tristan Pollock at 500 Startups, and they sat us down and said, Garrett, what's your goal? And I said, B2B. And they said, well, why is that? Because that's how you can make the change.
Right.
We're not trying to compete with supplement companies. We want to give them this power that we've built with digital health and actually make the change through existing companies as opposed to trying to compete with them. And they said, well, if you're doing that, then just do that. Don't try to do B2C and get these metrics. Be it your startup. You have to be aggressive. You have to execute. This experimental model would work for a corporate.
Right.
But just start selling to the customers you want to sell to. So we said, okay, well, we've gone through this long enough. We've learned enough about our clientele. And starting, I think it was March, we officially, we did the name change and we focused exclusively on B2B.
Okay, so relatively recently.
Yes.
And so how has that been going? You're going into now, your clients, the other businesses that actually pretty intimately at this point. How are they reacting to the service that you're providing?
It's been a dream. Yeah. So I think the other thing was we play to our strengths. I'm much better at selling to a business than I am to tens of thousands of consumers. I feel like you can't make an entire group happy, but you can certainly make one company very happy when you're selling to them.
Interesting.
So, what we found is our customers love what we're building because they've come to us already trying to have built something similar and spent the money, so they know exactly what they're looking for. When we first started experimenting in March, we started an aggressive outbound strategy, and I realized that was a waste of time, simply because if a company's already not looking to get into this digital health space, you're trying to convince them, and you're trying to show them how you could help, but that's already an uphill battle. Yeah. And when we actually changed it to an inbound organic strategy, customers are coming to us saying, we see you're building something, we want to do something similar, and it's an easy sales process for us.
Interesting. And so when you first made that transition to B2B, did you have kind of a hypothesis of the types of companies that this would be attractive to?
Absolutely.
And then was that hypothesis correct? What was that kind of process like of really kind of identifying, the top leads that you were going to be going after? Yeah,
so having worked in the industry before and actually having our own B2C company for that short period of time, our customers were who we saw as competitors. And even some of our raw materials suppliers that we were working in B2C became our first clients. Because they said, whenever you decide to open up an API or make this business facing, we'd love to have this ourselves.
Gotcha.
So it was a really easy process actually finding clients because they were the ones who we had our eyes on as competitors from day one. And so that process was relatively organic.
And kind of describe to me your team a little bit, because you're going to established companies now, usually they have some scientists on their team. They think about their product. Hopefully they have some scientists on their team. They're thinking about their product and where they're going to take it in the future. And then they're trusting you to kind of like provide them the information they need to kind of develop their products further and really establish strong claims and customer engagement, all that kind of, like, what type of team have you built to kind of like answer all those questions for them?
Yeah, so our team primarily consists of medical professionals and technologists. So it's mostly developers, mostly MDs that focus on research. The way we see our business working is we're selling to companies that are great at marketing. Yeah, they're phenomenal at getting customers.
Okay, so they tackle that. That's how nutraceutical companies get to that kind of first level. They have strong marketing, strong branding. It's more of a branding play at that point.
Precisely. So the way we've seen it is build a strong product that we know. We focus on the data. The only way for us to get data in is if our customers are successful in marketing our platform, which is actually why we found this very harmonious strategy where we focus on the software, we focus on customer engagement, and we give this tool to our customers to then market to their buyers.
Interesting.
And that model has been the best success, because then it allows us just to focus on the analysis of the end user data as opposed to the acquisition of end users.
I gotcha. And to date, how much money have you raised? Like, did you do like a friends and family round to get things started? You mentioned 500 startups. Did that include investment? Like, just to get the product to this point where you have a team and you're getting that initial traction. You launched back in March and you had some learnings before that. How did you make it this far?
Yes, so in my first startup, I bore witness to true bootstrapping, and I chose to actually emulate that with Biomarker. I've seen many times how, especially here in the Bay Area, companies try to market a product before they have customers, before they have sales. And for an investor, they're looking for reasons to say no.
Yep.
And nothing is a greater risk than you haven't even proven that people are willing to pay you for what you've built yet.
Right.
And that's where we started to focus. So we did friends and family rounds. It was mostly a lot of our savings. So we put, founder money was really put into this. And our first major raise was through 500 startups for 150,000. So to date, we've raised around 320,000 to get us to where we are now. Okay. And we've already received offers to close our seed round of 1.5. And we're looking to go directly into a Series A around Q2 of next year.
Okay, fantastic. So pretty quick growth.
Well, it's been quick growth, but it's been a very long lead time to where we are now.
Yeah.
So it was raising to help with products, raising to research customers. But now that we actually have sales, we're dealing with enterprises where our contract size are 5 to 12 million.
Wow.
So we have, low volume but very high touch.
Yeah.
So for our raise, it's really just to build on personnel, and it's not to prove out the concept anymore.
Sure. So it's a proven need. People are coming on using it not only to kind of prove the efficacy of their drugs, but also to just not always drugs in every case, right? Nutraceuticals and medicines and stuff like that, but also kind of engaging with their customers and building out the LTV. So it's kind of like multifaceted as far as the solution goes.
Exactly. So when we see businesses that succeed in engagement, they're great at just email marketing. Buy our product, we have a discount coming this month, or you're a great customer, here's this referral.
Yeah.
As opposed to, let's see how your customers actually react to your product.
Yeah.
And when you're going to market a new product with the same ingredient, don't market it to everyone in your CRM. Focus on a set of customers that physically respond well.
Yeah.
And we call that biometric marketing.
Right.
And that's actually what we're helping our customers with.
Interesting. And so kind of bring the conversation back to the original vision of kind of filling that gap in between, launching a new product and clinical studies. How do you see Biomarker, what you're doing, kind of changing that process, or does this kind of then feed into clinical studies? Like how?
Precisely.
I'm
So my real vision is when we look at the human body as a system, what you put into it affects your health, whether it's a medication, a food, a supplement, cannabis, it all affects the human system.
Right.
So what we've seen is that consumers have become so digitized. We want to collect the input, right now it's dietary supplements, and measure the output. That input can be anything. So as a way of actually working with for-profit businesses that are going to go through the steps to get this into consumers' hands, we're developing this model where data is a byproduct of sales, and it helps optimize on the sales process. Now, through that data can be used to fast-track products for IRB approval and clinical studies. Because right now, we've seen how it's done where you have a product and you are making an assumption as to what you want to study about it. And that's a very broken system, as opposed to taking all the known data that product is generating with your buyers,
Right.
and then isolating which variables are of interest.
Interesting.
We can find how maybe we make assumptions. Melatonin can help with sleep.
Yeah.
But what happens if you connect every data point that a customer generates that's taking melatonin, and you discover, well, not only does it help with sleep, but it also helps with anxiety or weight loss.
Yeah.
Only once that data point is there that you can connect those dots.
How are you? I mean, this is digging down into the details a little bit, but like, how do you isolate the effects of different products? Because someone might change the way they're eating or sleeping, and then taking different, say a cannabis product and a sleep aid, and it's
That's the hardest part.
Yes. You kind of say, all right, train them on how to train them on isolating the variables, be only change one thing about how you're going about this, or are you kind of I don't know. It's a complicated issue, right?
It is, and the platform is actually designed for that, to help with engagement with customers. So let's say you're taking a multivariable product, like a multivitamin with multiple ingredients in it.
Right.
Well, it's going to be difficult to know if one ingredient actually drove that effect. But the way we measure everything with Biomarker is the consumer is their own baseline. So let's say you start taking a product for the first time. We'll take all of the collected data we have about you when you never took that product.
Okay.
And we weigh that against your data when you have taken it. And we try to drown out the noise, try to drown out environmental variables that could impact your assumptions. So the goal here is you take a multivitamin, you're using Biomarker to measure if the multivitamin's working. What Biomarker will tell you is essentially the p-value. We believe that there's X% likelihood that this product actually drove the effects that you claim.
Yeah.
If you increase the amount of data you're entering, or provide this integration, we can increase the robustness of our analysis. So we're essentially driving customer purchasing using their own health data. If there's insufficient information, we tell them.
Yeah.
But it's really driving confidence in the buyers.
Interesting. So I'm going to do this a little bit earlier in the show today than I normally do, but I do want to kind of turn to the audience specifically because I see Jacob sitting back here, and he is developing a wonderful new product. And if I do say so myself, I would probably consume the product just without any of the health benefits, but Well, I'll let him pitch it to you, but also I know you have questions about like how to kind of establish the benefits of the product that you're selling. So.
Great to meet you. Thanks for coming today. So we make functional health beverages, cold pressed juices, and we actually juice the whole hemp plant. So full spectrum phytocannabinoids, and then those are blended or formulated with other fruit, vegetable juices, but also things like turmeric and ginger. And we have formulations that are kind of, an energy or a calming, and those kind of formulations. So it's kind of twofold where we go. One is that I think that there's a lot of, herbalism and kind of alternative medicines, or if you would want to call them that way, are generally known, kind of on a person-to-person level to be pretty effective, right? But we can't make those kind of claims. And then we're also in the secondary space where we have to be very cautious about making any kind of a claim for, a food product that's, we're not trialing or doing anything like that with. And so it's really interesting to learn about a platform like this where we can almost empower the consumer to, like you're saying, find this way of showing efficacy for a product that they're using. And, that's the big question for us, is we have something in there that has very bioactive, great ingredients, it's delivered through a lipid delivery system. How it's so hard to create that, that narrative of like how we're talking about how this is going to affect you without me tripping over something that I'm not supposed to say, and also telling you, well, it's going to make you feel good. It's really hard to quantify, and I'm not quite sure how we do that.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting topic. I've worked with a lot of companies in that same situation, and the way a neurochemist or a biochemist would work with it is we look at the functional ingredients. Mm-hmm. So if you have turmeric, well, we have tens of thousands of studies looking at turmeric. Mm-hmm. So it's essentially what most companies would do is they would take these clinical or peer-reviewed studies on the ingredients and then say, well, turmeric's been known to do X or Y. Yep. Therefore, when you're marketing your product, you make sure you have that same quantity and you can make that same claim. Mm-hmm. This has turmeric and it's been known to help with X, Y, or Z. Right. Now, the fact is that says nothing about your actual product. It's an ingredient claim. Right. So what we're aiming to do is to actually help a business such as yourself, where if your customers are taking your product, you're not making claims anymore. You're actually taking that de-identified aggregate data from all of your customers, and you're analyzing and saying, our product doesn't promise to help with absorption or pain or inflammation. Our customers who have taken our product have shown the following. Right. With lab tests, they've shown a reduction in inflammation, or with memory quizzes, they've shown an improvement in short-term memory recall. Mm-hmm. So then you're switching from claims to reports. Gotcha. And then customers can actually say, well, I'd love to know if this product works for me. Mm-hmm. And using the software, they can actually buy your product and test it out. Mm-hmm. So it's completely shifting the way we market products on their head, right, where it's no longer marketing. It's like Google Analytics. You're just reporting your metrics. Right. And you're not having to spend $3 million in 18 months to make one claim about your product when there could be 1,000. Mm-hmm.
I think that's fantastic information and kind of a good tactical way of thinking about how to launch kind of some of these health products is, just think about the ingredients that you're making your product out of and rely on other studies that have been previously done. That could be your very benchmark marketing. And
exactly.
Then it actually, helps you kind of become kind of a thought leader.
Credible.
I can say that.
Yeah,
Credible.
It's about credibility.
That's a much better word.
We've seen so many companies, they have great marketing teams, great design teams. They can really sell a product that looks sexy. The problem is most of the ingredients are not even at their minimal effective dose. They flood the products with, it's mostly water, sugar, sweetener, and then they have 5 milligrams or 100 milligrams. But if you're selling it in a liquid formula, it's no longer a supplement. Mm-hmm. Now you can say it's a nutritional beverage. Right. Different even supplement or nutritional beverage facts where you don't have to say the dosage inside of that ingredient base. Yep. And that's where there's increased opacity. Consumers don't know what's the ingredient driving the effect. Right. Now it's helpful for a company with great marketing, but it also means that you could be wasting money on low efficacy, low margin products in that mix.
Right. Are companies self-reporting this data?
We're starting to see that actually. So there are many companies entering into, especially in the nootropic space, the cognitive enhancement space. You're having people testing this out, self-reporting. Oh, I took this product and it helped with my memory. But the majority of these self-reports are so qualitative. you can't take them seriously.
I'm wondering with the consumer, from the consumer side, I believe you said that the consumer with your product can prove and sort of use your product to prove that the products are actually working. How does that work?
So for the consumer right now, we never want to say prove, because that's from the research, it's an extreme statement. What we want to do is we want to help consumers with their initial assumptions about a product. If a consumer decides to buy a product because the product's claiming to help them with pain or sleep or weight loss, the consumer's going to take in, most of the time, it's all retrospective. They say, oh, I took that product last week, I felt great. And then they decide to keep taking it. Well, there's a lot of variables involved in you feeling great. So we want to take the data that you generate during that time and say, you think the product worked. We believe, based on the data we have, that there's a 10% chance the product actually did anything. You can keep taking it if you like, because we have some data that shows, or you can stop. And if they stop, then we recommend another product in the company's wheelhouse, which helps increase the LTV as well.
Is there? It almost seems like this platform is a really great way for us as a business to be able to organize information about these effects of what the different formulations or different even potencies that we're putting into it, and almost create a metric that would make it easy for a consumer to identify trends that they may have based on what other people's results were, and that helps them choose a product even almost?
Exactly, and that's actually part of our second phase, where we're implementing machine learning to predict what ingredients a consumer should take, and then helping assign those products. Now, that's really one of the, it's the primary goal. We want the purchasing of products to be data-driven. And you can imagine a tool like Biomarker when you're going on Amazon, where most products are purchased online now. Rather than reading reviews on how customers say this product worked great, you actually have a biometric score that can predict how you would react to that product. And you're buying based on your own data. And that's really the vision that we have.
And what is the mechanism that our consumers would use to... Is it an app, I take it, or something?
Yeah, so right now we have a web application that also has a mobile component to it, but the way it works is we brand the entire interface for an organization, and right now we have about 403 APIs. So you can integrate everything from HealthKit, Fitbit, to genetic services, microbiome, lab services. So rather than having all of these fragmented or data siloed areas for a consumer, we're saying, look, you're producing data, whether you like it or not. We're going to give you the power to put it all in one place and actually help with your health, instead of giving that data to someone else so they can monetize and figure out how to market to you.
Have you run into any situations where some of these companies that have these APIs are kind of doing competitive products?
That is a feature that we do provide. It is helpful for a business owner to see if their customer is creating a regimen. For instance, in our platform, saying I'm taking products from these 4 companies, and they're using a product from your brand, to then see what other products your customers are taking. Maybe that helps with your own product development, or to then market a lower cost alternative to that customer.
Sure.
So yeah, a competitive analysis is a component.
But I'm saying for you in particular, because you mentioned Fitbit, and I can imagine Fitbit at one of their product development, studies just being like, we are going to produce Biomarker, right? We are going to collect this data and try to give it back to the customers. Like, is anyone has there been any friction there with you
yes, I see what you're
other
saying.
Companies?
So, the beauty there is we really don't like to concern ourselves too much with a potential wearable or hardware company becoming a competitor. And that's simply due to the nature of competition across all of the wearable companies.
Sure.
So Fitbit doesn't play well with HealthKit. And you have, Google, you have Samsung, you have Microsoft, you have these major players producing their own ecosystems that really don't play well with one another.
Yeah.
And consumers rarely have all of their information in one ecosystem.
Yeah. We'll
So-
try telling that to Apple.
Yeah. Well, so it's that competition that actually helps us. So we look at a consumer and say, rather than create a walled garden where all of your data is in one ecosystem, let's take data from every ecosystem. You have the authority to grant someone access to that and put it into one place.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Michael. He's on the mic, people.
For the first time.
Oh, my goodness.
So, Garrett, you've talked a lot about very objective quantifications, clinical trials, like medicinal effects. bringing it to the cannabis industry, there's a lot of companies that use effect or emotion-based marketing, creating products for consumers that are going to, yes, maybe make them sleep, but bring a little bit more subjective effects like calming or a product that is going to give you bliss. How do you see Biomarker, or do you see Biomarker being used to quantify these more subjective effects and maybe like emotional effects?
Yes, so with cannabis, it's definitely interesting because we have so much data that shows that it works.
Yeah.
But right now, the concern is the optics of cannabis as an industry. When you go to a leafly.com or you go into these websites reading reports, you're taking people, claims saying this product really helped with sleep.
Right.
It did phenomenal things for inflammation. And then you have comments next to that saying it's a creeper or, gave me the munchies. That really affect credibility.
Right.
So what we want to do is actually we have tools built into our platform where we can introduce cognitive behavioral exams.
Yeah.
Dual MBOC, exams or quizzes that are used in a diagnostic setting. So if a user's taking cannabis and they're reporting that it helps with anxiety, well, then we're going to have them take an actual anxiety questionnaire that a physician would use inside of our system when they're taking the cannabis strain.
Yeah.
So we have a bit more robust analysis of that qualitative information.
My God, I'm imagining like some distant future where you have so much data on all these different products and kind of the results that people are seeing, and having it cross-analyzed with something like what Cannabis Reports is doing, kind of like really understanding the strains and like the different cannabinoids in each strain, and like boiling down the different effects to the different cannabinoids and compounds in the plant.
We're already starting that, actually.
Like, how far away are we from like understanding that? Because like personalization in the cannabis space is a huge opportunity that it feels like it's very far away, just because there's been such a lack of research to date. But as we've learned in the past, things can accelerate quite quickly.
Yeah, so we've actually already begun that process. We have a blockchain partner that allows us to pull a lot of that data. So one of the key drivers that we've seen is insurers. When we look at cannabis, we'd love for this to be something that a physician can openly give to any patient, and it doesn't have the negative optics that it has in other areas of the country.
Right.
The issue, obviously, is regulation. If you cannot patent the cannabis plant, then pharma doesn't want to get involved. There's not enough money in it for that.
Sure.
So, and that's because you cannot standardize the plant strain. You can have a certain strain, let's say a certain sativa or indica, but every time you produce that strain, the terpene, the CBD, THC ratio will always be different.
It's open to the environmental things, but
exactly. So
getting down into kind of the isolating and creating the different
exactly. So we have a blockchain partner that actually helps us assess not only the lab readout, the pH of the soil, how the plant was manufactured, how it was formulated, what type of environment was it produced in, and we take that data and we take the output from Biomarker, so then we can see if this certain plant strain resulted in the same health outcomes, even if the ratios were off.
Yeah.
Well, then we found a model that we could potentially cover. And that's something that we're starting to get into. I think that there's a lot of politics involved in red tape in cannabis, much like in the medical industry.
Sure.
So what we're trying to do is work in industries that are not as regulated to get the data we need. So then when those industries become a little bit alleviated from that regulation, we can apply our technology without any roadblocks.
Yeah. I'd like the record to show that he mentioned blockchain twice, and I didn't geek out.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like when you're in this space, you always have the trigger words of, machine learning, AI, blockchain, the fluff words that if you really drill down to some companies, you realize they don't have it yet. So we like to avoid saying it too much because there's a lot of fluff.
There's a huge opportunity in medicine, in cannabis, to use the blockchain to really understand like all the different elements, all the different inputs, and like where the plant has been. And I'll just leave it at that. Awesome. Like I think this is a very exciting opportunity to kind of help cannabis get into kind of the mainstream, and have people understand. I know we have seen like topical products where it's like, you hold them next to each other, they say different things on the labels. I'm like, is this actually just the same thing? And like, is it just being applied for, different uses? And that gets to more of the marketing side. But fascinating. Any last questions for Garrett before we wrap it up?
I did want to go back to your startup experience. I wanted to get maybe your perspective on how you chose an incubator versus non-incubator.
Oh, good question.
Oh, excellent question. So when we first started with Biomarker, It was in 2014. We went into an incubator called EvoNexus. It was a Qualcomm-backed incubator. They didn't invest, they didn't take any equity, but they did give us office space and mentorship. So that seemed like a very valid, option for us. Then the next incubator we did was 500 startups. We did not decide to go into that incubator off just applying. I had reached out to one of my mentors and said, I'm going to be in San Francisco. Do you have anyone you can connect me with? And I ended up getting coffee with one of the partners at 500 startups and just talking through what I was looking to do with the company. He said, well, if you're interested in coming into our program, you can have a spot. And it was just by asking for advice that we ended up in the program, because I really enjoyed the feedback that he was giving me. It was constructive, it was helpful, and that was the decision. It wasn't just because of the cash. And I feel that for a lot of companies, they see an incubator as a goal, and that's not the case. An incubator should just be a catalyst to what you're currently doing, and you shouldn't see them as the savior that's going to help your company. You have to find the right incubator in the right space in your area and go with that. Yeah.
I appreciate that. Yeah, that is very much the truth. So you had mentioned working and obviously focusing a little bit on cannabis. Maybe not say exactly the companies that you are working with, but what types of companies have you talked to, and where is that seemingly, where is there a fit for Biomarker right now in the industry?
Yeah, so in cannabis, what we found is that there's certainly interest, but there's so much volatility in the industry as a whole that we need to work with large companies that already have a strong foothold in the space, where they have the marketing teams that can say, this is a great SaaS platform, we have a large customer base, we can see reason in applying this. But from our engagement thus far, we found that so many of these small, cannabis companies, they're bootstrapping. They have cash, but they don't have expansive marketing teams that focus on marketing SaaS platforms. So it still is a bit too early. So the idea sounds great, but execution is lacking. And I think that's due to both to a lot of experience amongst these teams. Some of them know the plant very well. That's their focus, and they don't go beyond that. And that's a smart thing to do. But it's only finding groups that have that are triple threats. They have the product, they have the buyers, they have the marketing ability, that are prime candidates for us.
Gotcha. Very interesting. Garrett, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a problem that I've been thinking about a lot, and I know the industry as a whole, kind of just like, how do we continue to push this research forward? And it's going to be a floodgate as soon as it legalizes, but as much as we can be doing to understand the products, it just helps everyone, I think.
Well, thank you. That really is our goal. You can't, you can always question a claim, but you can't argue if the data is presented to you. So that is our mission. We want to help the industry by actually taking away the naysayers and proving them with factual data that's being generated. So thank you for the time, Ben.
Yeah. And if you are watching us, wherever you're watching us, Facebook, YouTube, podcast, listening, like us, share us, comment, leave a review. Help us get the word out. We're trying to get more followers so we can have a more engaged audience and questions. Our lovely Train is joining us finally. Next week, we are focusing on building a vision around your product and having it go viral, if I'm allowed to say that word. I don't know if I'm allowed to anymore. But we have two of our mentors, Chikati Chima from moonshotpr.com and Guillermo Bravo from foottraffic.co. These guys have worked with some of the companies coming out of Gateway, many other cannabis companies, and they're doing really great things to just help build the traffic for those products. So join us next week. We're going to get really tactical. If you're in Vegas, come find me. I'll be there for MJ BizCon. So until next week.